Picture this. You're standing in a village so beautiful, it doesn't feel real. Wooden houses with flower boxes, a crystal-clear lake reflecting snow-capped mountains, and a church spire rising into the clouds. This isn't a painting. This isn't a movie set. This is Austria. But here's what most people don't know. Austria isn't just about pretty views and Sound of Music tours. This small country, barely the size of South Carolina, was once the heart of an empire that ruled half of Europe for 600 years, and somehow that grandeur never left. Today, we're going beyond the postcards. We're going to discover castles where kings were held for ransom, lakes that disappear and reappear like magic, and a capital city that refuses to let go of its imperial past. And, hey, if you're excited to explore Austria with me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss where we're going today. Also, drop a like if you're ready for this adventure. It really helps us bring you more incredible travel content like this. So buckle up, because we're about to explore Austria in a way you've never seen before. Let's start where Austria truly begins, in the mountains. The Austrian Alps aren't just beautiful. They're the reason Austria exists. Think about it. When empires were rising and falling across Europe, these mountains stood like giant walls, protecting the valleys below. Armies couldn't just march through here. They had to find passes, negotiate with local lords, and often, they just gave up. And at the center of it all stands the Grossglockner. At 3,798 meters, it's Austria's highest peak. But it's not just a mountain, it's a symbol. Locals call it the Black Mountain, because even in summer, its peak stays dark with rock and ice. Now, here's something incredible. To reach this giant, you can drive the Grossglockner High Alpine Road. Imagine this: 48 kilometers of winding road, 36 hairpin turns, climbing through different climate zones. You start in green meadows with wildflowers, and within an hour, you're surrounded by glaciers and snow. But the real magic happens at the Kaiser Franz Josefs Hohe viewpoint. You step out of your car, and there it is, the Pasterze Glacier, Austria's largest, stretching 8 kilometers down the mountainside like a frozen river. It's been there for thousands of years. But here's the sad truth. It's melting. Every year, it shrinks a little more. Scientists say it's lost almost half its size in just the last century. Standing there, feeling the cold wind on your face, you realize something. These mountains aren't just scenery. They shape the people who live here. They made Austrians patient, precise, and respectful of nature's power. Let me tell you about the villages tucked into these valleys. Take Heiligenblut, for example. The name means holy blood, and there's a wild legend behind it. They say a Danish knight named Britius was crossing the Alps back in the 10th century, carrying a relic, a flask containing drops of Christ's blood. An avalanche buried him alive. Years later, when they found his body, the relic was still safe, hidden in a wound on his leg. The village grew around that spot, and even today, you can see the relic in a special chapel. These aren't just stories. They're how people in these isolated valleys made sense of their harsh, beautiful world. Now let's talk about something most tourists never see: the wildlife. Up here in the high Alps, life adapts in incredible ways. Ibex, those mountain goats with the massive curved horns, climb on cliff faces that look impossible. I'm talking 80-degree angles. They do this because up there, predators can't reach them. And if you're lucky, really lucky, you might spot a golden eagle. These birds are massive, with wingspans reaching over 2 meters. They don't flap much. They just ride the thermals, those rising columns of warm air, scanning the ground for marmots. Speaking of marmots, these chubby little guys are everywhere in the alpine meadows. They whistle to warn each other about danger, and the sound echoes across the valleys like nature's own alarm system. But here's what gets me. In winter, marmots hibernate for up to 9 months. Can you imagine? 9 months of sleep in an underground burrow, while the world above is buried in snow. When they finally emerge in spring, the meadows explode with wildflowers and life begins again. This cycle of harsh winters and brief, intense summers defined Austrian culture. People here learned to prepare, to save, to make every good day count. You can see it in how they build their houses, how they store food, even in how they plan their lives. Now, let's head west, where the mountains meet one of the most beautiful cities in Europe, Salzburg. If Vienna is Austria's head, Salzburg is its heart, and that heart beats to music. The first thing you notice when you arrive is the Hohensalzburg Fortress. It sits on a hill 120 meters above the old town, white stone walls gleaming in the sun. It's one of the largest medieval castles in Europe, and it was never conquered, not once. Armies tried during the Peasants' Revolt in 1525, but the fortress held strong. You can take a funicular railway up there now. As you rise, the view opens up. Baroque church spires, the Salzach River winding through the city, and beyond it, the Alps. It's breathtaking. But Salzburg's real claim to fame isn't the fortress. It's a guy who was born here in 1756, in a modest yellow building on Getreidegasse Street. His name? Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Here's the thing about Mozart. He was a child prodigy who could compose symphonies at age 5, perform for emperors at 6, and by the time he was a teenager, he'd already created masterpieces. But Salzburg didn't appreciate him. The archbishop, who employed Mozart, treated him like a servant. Mozart wanted freedom, respect, recognition. He didn't get it here, so he left, moved to Vienna, died there, poor and unrecognized. And now, Salzburg has turned him into its biggest brand. Mozart chocolates, Mozart museums, Mozart concerts, Mozart everything. There's irony in that, don't you think? The city that pushed him away now can't stop celebrating him. But walk through Salzburg at dawn, before the tour buses arrive, and you'll feel something special. The cobblestone streets are quiet. The Salzach River reflects the orange glow of sunrise. Coffee shops start opening, and the smell of fresh pastries fills the air. The Old Town is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and for good reason. It's remarkably preserved. Narrow medieval streets open into Baroque squares. The Salzburg Cathedral dominates the Residenzplatz with its massive dome and twin towers. Inside, the acoustics are incredible. They say when the organ plays, you feel the notes in your chest. Every summer, the Salzburg Festival takes over the city. For 6 weeks, the world's greatest opera singers, conductors, and orchestras perform here. It started in 1920, right after World War I, when Austria was broken and poor. The founders believed art could heal, and maybe it did. Quick pause here. If you're enjoying this journey through Austria so far, make sure you've hit that like button. It takes just a second, but it makes a huge difference for us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We've got so much more to explore together. Here's something interesting. Just 40 kilometers south of Salzburg stands another fortress, Hohenwerfen. It's Hohensalzburg's sister castle, built by the same archbishop around the same time. But Hohenwerfen has a wilder history. It was a prison, a hunting lodge, a military base. During World War II, the Nazis used it as a training facility. Now, it's famous for falconry demonstrations. Every day, massive eagles and vultures soar above the castle walls, diving and swooping in displays that have been perfected over centuries. Watching these birds, with the Alps as a backdrop and a medieval fortress beneath your feet, it's like stepping into a legend. Salzburg and its surroundings remind you that Austria isn't just about the past. It's about how the past lives on, adapted and reimagined, but never forgotten. From Salzburg, let's journey east into a region that looks like it was painted by an artist who couldn't decide between reality and fantasy. Welcome to the SALZKAMMERGUT, the Lake District. The name means salt chamber estate, and salt made this region rich. For thousands of years, people mined salt from these mountains. Salt was currency. It was power. The Romans called salt miners the white gold miners. But today, people come here for something else: the lakes. Let me tell you about Hallstatt first, because this place broke the internet before breaking. The internet was even a thing. Hallstatt is a village of about 800 people, squeezed between a mountain and a lake. Traditional wooden houses with painted facades stack up the hillside. A Lutheran church's spire reflects in the crystal-clear water. It's so picturesque that China built an exact replica of the entire village. When a photo of Hallstatt went viral online, everything changed. Suddenly, millions of tourists descended on this tiny village. Instagram influencers crowded the best photo spots. Chinese tour groups arrived by the busload. The locals, who'd lived quietly for generations, didn't know what hit them. UNESCO threatened to revoke its World Heritage status if the village couldn't manage the crowds. The mayor limited tour buses. They asked visitors to respect the fact that real people live here. It's a strange problem to have, being too beautiful. But here's what most tourists miss. Hallstatt isn't just pretty. It has the oldest salt mine in the world, still operating after 7,000 years. You can tour it. You descend into the mountain through tunnels carved by Bronze Age miners. They found a 3,000-year-old wooden staircase down there, perfectly preserved in the salt. Think about that. People were walking those steps before Rome even existed. The Hallstätter Sea, the lake itself, is 125 meters deep, and so clear you can see fish swimming 10 meters down. In summer, locals swim in it. In winter, mist rises from the surface at dawn, and the mountains disappear into white clouds. It's otherworldly. Now, let's talk about the other lakes, because Hallstatt is just the beginning. Wolfgangsee St. Wolfgang's Lake stretches long and blue between forested hills. The town of St. Wolfgang sits on its shore, and there's a pilgrimage church there that people have visited for over 1,000 years. Legend says St. Wolfgang himself built the first church on that spot after the devil told him to throw an axe and build wherever it landed. The devil thought the axe would land somewhere impossible. It didn't. You can take a cogwheel railway from St. Wolfgang up to Schafberg Peak. It's one of the steepest railways in Austria, climbing through meadows and forests until suddenly the trees disappear and you're above the tree line. At the summit, 1,183 meters high, you can see 13 lakes spread across the landscape like scattered sapphires. Here's something locals know. The SALZKAMMERGUT has microclimates. You can have rain in one valley and sunshine in the next, just 10 kilometers away. The mountains create weather patterns that change hour by hour. Fishermen check the sky constantly. Hikers learn to read the clouds. It's a place where nature still sets the rules. And then there's Tronsee, Austria's deepest lake at 191 meters. It's colder than the others, fed by mountain streams that never warm up. But it's also dramatic. The Traunstein mountain rises almost straight up from the water like a wall. Its rock face so sheer that only expert climbers attempt it. On the lake's shore sits Gmunden, a town famous for its ceramics. For 500 years, they've made green and white pottery here, and you'll see it in every shop window, every cafe. The Schloss Ort Castle sits on an island in the lake, connected to shore by a wooden bridge. It's been there since 1080, and it's appeared in so many Austrian TV shows that locals joke it's more famous than some actors. But my favorite lake? The Green Lake, Grüner See. This one is magic, literally. In winter, it's barely there. Just a shallow pond in a meadow surrounded by benches and walking trails. But when spring comes and the snow melts, something incredible happens. The water level rises and rises until it swallows the park. Benches, trees, trails, everything goes underwater. The lake grows to 12 meters deep, and divers come from around the world to swim through a submerged forest. The water is so clear, it's like flying through green space. You can see grass waving on the bottom, park benches sitting normally as if waiting for someone, bridges that now hang in the water column. It's surreal. Then, as summer arrives, the water drains away again, and by autumn, the park returns. Sadly, they banned diving there in 2016 to protect the ecosystem. Too many people were disturbing it. But the lake still does its disappearing act every year, reminding us that nature doesn't care about our schedules or our Instagram feeds. Now, let's head to the capital, Vienna, the city where Austria's imperial past isn't just remembered, it's lived every single day. Vienna doesn't greet you gently. It overwhelms you with grandeur. The Ringstrasse, a boulevard that circles the old city, is lined with museums, theaters, parliament buildings, and palaces that were designed to echo Athens and Rome. This wasn't an accident. In the 1860s, when Emperor Franz Joseph ordered the medieval walls torn down, he wanted to replace them with monuments that screamed power and culture. And it worked. Walking through Vienna's first district feels like being on a stage that never closed. Every building has a story. Every street corner has a statue of someone important. Let's start with Schönbrunn Palace, because you can't understand Vienna without understanding this place. It was the Habsburgs' summer residence, though calling it a summer house is like calling the sun a little warm. This palace has 1,441 rooms, 1,441. Most of them have never been opened to the public because there are simply too many. The gardens stretch forever. Manicured hedges, marble fountains, the Gloriette Monument sitting on a hill overlooking everything. When Maria Theresa, the only female Habsburg ruler, lived here, she hosted balls with thousands of guests. The palace's Hall of Mirrors is where a 6-year-old Mozart played for the Empress, and she was so impressed she had him sit on her lap. Franz Joseph, Austria's longest reigning emperor, was born in Schönbrunn and spent every summer here. But his personal rooms are shockingly modest. A narrow military bed, a simple desk, a washstand. This guy ruled 50 million people, and he slept like a soldier. Some historians say he never got over the guilt of how much his empire cost ordinary people. Now, let's move to the Hofburg Palace in the city center. This was the Habsburgs' winter residence and the seat of their power. It's not one building. It's a complex that grew over 700 years. The Habsburgs just kept adding wings, courtyards, and halls whenever they needed more space or wanted to show off. Today, the Hofburg is where Austria's president works, but most of it is museums. The Imperial apartments show how the emperors lived. The Silver Collection displays table settings for banquets with hundreds of guests. And the Sisi Museum is dedicated to Empress Elizabeth, Franz Josef's wife, who was one of the most fascinating and tragic figures in Austrian history. Sisi was beautiful, rebellious, and unhappy. She hated court life, the strict protocols, the constant scrutiny. She traveled obsessively, kept her weight at dangerous lows, and wrote poetry about death. In 1898, an Italian anarchist stabbed her with a sharpened file as she walked to a ferry in Geneva. She didn't even realize she'd been stabbed at first. The wound was so precise, so thin, that she walked several meters before collapsing. She died shortly after. Austrians are still fascinated by her. She represents something, maybe freedom, maybe rebellion against the very system that defined their country. But Vienna isn't just palaces. Let me tell you about the coffee houses, because they're institutions. Café Central opened in 1876, and it's barely changed since. You walk in, and it feels like stepping into the 19th century. Marble columns, vaulted ceilings, waiters in black vests and bow ties. The coffee arrives on a silver tray with a glass of water and a small biscuit. Here's the thing. You're expected to stay for hours. Viennese coffee houses aren't about caffeine. They're about time. Reading newspapers, writing letters, thinking, debating. Freud developed psychoanalysis in coffee houses. Trotsky planned revolutions in them. The culture is so important that UNESCO listed Viennese coffee house culture as intangible cultural heritage. Try this test. Order a melange, which is like a cappuccino, and just sit. Don't rush. Watch people. You'll notice something. Viennese people aren't in a hurry. They don't gulp their coffee standing at a counter. They sit, they talk, they take their time. In a world that's always speeding up, Vienna insists on slowing down. Another thing about Vienna, formality. The language has multiple ways to say you. Du is informal for friends and family. Sei is formal for everyone else. And Viennese people don't switch lightly. You can work with someone for years and still use Sie. Moving to du is a big deal, almost like a declaration of friendship. This comes from centuries of court protocol, where saying the wrong thing to the wrong person could ruin you. The empire is gone, but the formality remains. Some people find it cold, others find it respectful. Either way, it's distinctly Austrian. Now let's talk about St. Stephen's Cathedral, or Stephansdom. This Gothic masterpiece sits right in the heart of Vienna, and it's been there since 1147. The South Tower stands 136 meters tall, and you can climb all 343 steps to the top. It's not easy. The spiral staircase is narrow and steep, but the view is worth every step. All of Vienna spreads below you. The cathedral's roof is covered in 230,000 glazed tiles, forming zigzag patterns and the double-headed eagle of the Habsburg coat of arms. During World War II, fire almost destroyed the cathedral. The wooden roof beams burned, the bells fell, and Viennese people wept in the streets. But they rebuilt it, tile by tile, using old photographs and documents. It reopened in 1952. Mozart's funeral was held here. Haydn's funeral too. The cathedral has survived plagues, wars, and fires. It's more than a church. It's Vienna's soul. Let me tell you one more story about Vienna, because it shows you what this city is about. In 1814, after Napoleon was defeated, European leaders came to Vienna for the Congress of Vienna to redraw the map of Europe. For 9 months, emperors, kings, and diplomats negotiated and partied. There were balls every night, concerts, banquets. The host, Emperor Franz, spent a fortune entertaining them. The Congress accomplished a lot. They created a balance of power that prevented major European wars for almost a century. But what Viennese people remember most? The parties. There's an old saying, the Congress doesn't progress, but it dances. That's Vienna in a nutshell. Serious about power, art, and culture, but always with style. Always with elegance. Before we move on, I want to say thank you to everyone who's subscribed and liked this video. You're the reason we can keep creating content like this. And if you're still on the fence, come on, hit that subscribe button. We've got incredible destinations coming up that you won't want to miss. From Vienna, let's follow the Danube west into the Wachau Valley, where Austria shows you a different kind of beauty, one that comes from a bottle. The Wachau is wine country. For over 2,000 years, people have grown grapes on these terraced hillsides. The Romans planted the first vines. Medieval monasteries perfected the techniques. Today, Wachau wines, especially Grüner Veltliner, are famous worldwide. But here's what makes this region special. It's not just about wine. It's about how wine is woven into the entire culture. Imagine this: steep hills rising from the Danube, covered in vineyards that cling to terraces held up by stone walls. These walls were built by hand, generations ago, stone by stone. In autumn, the vines turn golden, and from a distance, the hillsides look like they're glowing. Small villages dot the valley. Dürnstein, with its blue church tower, is the most famous. Why? Because Richard the Lionheart, King of England, was imprisoned here in 1192. Here's the story. Richard was returning from the Crusades when he made the mistake of crossing through Austria. He'd insulted Duke Leopold during the Siege of Acre, and Leopold hadn't forgotten. Leopold's men captured Richard and locked him in a castle above Dürnstein. Legend says Richard's loyal minstrel, Blondel, wandered from castle to castle singing Richard's favorite song. When he heard Richard singing back from inside the walls, he knew he'd found him. It's probably not true, but it's a good story. Richard's ransom was enormous: 150,000 marks of silver, about 3 times England's annual income. That money helped build walls around Vienna and funded Austrian expansion. One king's imprisonment changed the country's future. Today, Dürnstein is peaceful. You can walk its narrow streets, climb up to the castle ruins, and look out over the valley. In spring, apricot trees bloom, covering the hills in white blossoms. In summer, outdoor restaurants along the Danube serve fresh fish and local wine. In autumn, the harvest begins, and you can smell fermented grapes in the air. But the jewel of the Wachau is Melk Abbey. You can see it from kilometers away, a massive Baroque complex sitting on a cliff above the river. White and yellow facades, twin towers, a library that holds 100,000 books. The abbey was founded in 1089 by Benedictine monks, and monks still live there today. But what you see now was built in the early 1700s after a fire destroyed the original structures. The architect, Jacob Prantauer, created something that's more palace than monastery. Walk into the church, and your jaw drops. Gold everywhere. Frescoes covering the ceiling, creating the illusion that the roof opens to heaven. Marble pillars, ornate altars, and an organ that fills the space with sound so rich you feel it in your bones. The library is even more incredible. 2-story bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes. a ceiling fresco showing humans climbing from darkness into enlightenment. And the smell: old paper, leather, wood. It's the smell of centuries. During the Middle Ages, monasteries like Melk weren't just religious centers. They were schools, hospitals, and repositories of knowledge. When barbarians were burning books across Europe, monks were copying them by hand, preserving everything from classical philosophy to medical texts. The Wachau Valley reminds you that Austria's greatness wasn't just military or political. It was cultural. It was about preserving beauty, knowledge, and tradition through dark times. Let's head south now, across the Alps, to a part of Austria most tourists never see. Carinthia. Carinthia is different. The climate is warmer. Italian influences creep into the architecture and food. The lakes aren't cold and glacial. They're warm enough to swim in comfortably. And the people. They speak German with a dialect that sounds almost Slovenian, because for centuries, Slavic and Germanic cultures mixed here. Lake Wörthersee is Carinthia's crown jewel. It's the warmest alpine lake in Europe, heated by thermal springs beneath the surface. In summer, the water temperature reaches 28 degrees. That's bathing temperature. People flock here from Vienna and beyond, turning lakeside towns into bustling resorts. But Wörthersee has a darker history too. During World War II, the Nazis built a maternity home here as part of their Lebensborn program. They wanted racially pure children born in beautiful, controlled environments. It's a disturbing footnote to the lake's otherwise peaceful story. What I love about Carinthia is how it doesn't fit the Austrian stereotype. There are no guys in lederhosen playing accordions here. Instead, you get Italian-style pizzerias next to traditional Austrian Gasthäuser. You get bilingual road signs in German and Slovenian. You get a mix that feels unique. And then there's Burgenland, Austria's easternmost state, which is basically Hungary without being hungry. The land is flat, the lakes are shallow, and the villages have names like Grosswaresdorf that no German speaker can pronounce because they're originally Croatian. Burgenland is where Austria's neat national identity gets complicated. This region was part of Hungary for centuries. After World War I, Austria got it as compensation for losing so much other territory. The result? A patchwork of cultures that still exist today. Lake Neusiedl is the largest lake in Central Europe, but only 1.8 meters deep on average. Reed beds cover much of its shoreline, and it's a paradise for birds. Over 300 species stop here during migration. In spring and fall, the sky fills with flocks of geese and herons. But Neusiedl is weird. Some years, it almost dries up completely. Other years, it floods nearby villages. It doesn't have a significant inflow or outflow. It just sits there, rising and falling, with rainfall like a giant puddle. Wine grows well here too, especially around the town of Rust. The warm climate and unique soil produce sweet wines that pair perfectly with Austrian desserts. This eastern part of Austria reminds you that countries are never as homogeneous as they seem. Austria is German-speaking, yes, but it's also Slavic, Hungarian, Italian, and Czech. It's a crossroads, and that's what makes it interesting. So what is Austria really? It's a country that was once an empire, ruling 50 million people from Vienna's palaces. Then, in 1918, that empire shattered. The borders closed in. Austria became small, landlocked, diminished. But the interesting thing? The empire never really left. It lives in Vienna's coffee houses, where people still take 3 hours to drink 1 cup. It lives in the opera houses and concert halls, where classical music isn't nostalgia, it's identity. It lives in the formality of language, the precision of engineering, the care put into making schnitzel and strudel just right. Austria took what it was and compressed it into something smaller, but no less magnificent. A tiny country that punches way above its weight in culture, beauty, and quality of life. The mountains shape the people, patient, precise, respectful of nature's power. The empire shaped the culture, grand, formal, artistic. And the collapse shaped the identity, a nation that refuses to forget, that insists grandeur can survive loss. Walking through Austria, you realize that history doesn't die. It changes form, it adapts, and sometimes it becomes even more beautiful in its new shape. From the peaks of the Grossglockner to the Danube Valley vineyards, from Mozart's birthplace to Vienna's palaces, Austria isn't just a tourist destination. It's a testament to resilience, to culture, to the idea that a country can define itself by what it was and still become something new. And maybe that's the real lesson here. We all carry our past with us. The question isn't whether to let it go, it's how to carry it forward with grace. Austria figured that out. Now, I want to hear from you. What surprised you most about Austria? Was it the disappearing lake? The marmots hibernating for 9 months? Or maybe Vienna's coffeehouse culture? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you made it this far, you're clearly someone who loves deep dives into fascinating places. So do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got so many more incredible destinations lined up, from hidden gems in the Balkans to the forgotten cities of Central Asia. We're going places most travel channels ignore. Also, if this video taught you something new or made you want to visit Austria, smash that like button. It genuinely helps more people discover these stories. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering the stories that maps don't tell. I'll see you in the next adventure.